There's a specific moment you already know, even if you've never had a name for it. A song you've heard 300 times reaches a certain bar. Maybe the drums cut out. Maybe a second voice slides in underneath the first one. Maybe a single note is held about half a second longer than it has any business being held. And something moves across the back of your neck and rolls down your arms. The hair stands up. Your skin goes textured. It lasts about 4 seconds, and then it's gone. And if someone had been watching you the whole time, they would have seen nothing at all except a person sitting very still with a slightly strange face. Now go open your freezer and lean into it. Same bumps, same hair standing up, same skin, 2 completely unrelated inputs, a chord progression and a blast of cold air, producing what looks like the identical output on the outside. Except one of them feels like absolutely nothing, and the other one is the reason people will pay $200 to stand in a field at night in the rain. That gap is the whole question, and the answer isn't in your skin. Your skin is just the printer. The interesting part is who's sending the print job. So let's start with the hardware, because the hardware is genuinely absurd. Underneath every single hair on your body, there is a tiny muscle. It's called the erector pili. It's roughly the size of the comma in this sentence, and you are carrying somewhere around 5 million of them right now. Its entire job, the whole resume, top to bottom, is to pull one hair from lying flat to standing straight up. That's the position. That's the career. For an animal covered in fur, this is a genuinely excellent piece of engineering, and it does 2 jobs. The first is heat. Standing hairs trap a layer of still air against the skin, which is exactly the same trick a duvet uses, and the same reason your cat looks like it gained 40% body mass the second it goes outside in January. The second is threat display. A cat that feels cornered inflates instantly into a much larger and much more regrettable cat without having to actually be one. Bluffing, but automated. You inherited the muscles. You inherited the wiring. You inherited the reflex, fully intact, still firing on schedule. What you did not inherit is the fur. This is the mechanical equivalent of keeping the light switch after demolishing the room. Every time you step out of a hot shower, your body executes a flawless, well-timed command to fluff a coat that hasn't existed for over 1 million years and produces instead a texture most commonly associated with a supermarket chicken. The cold version of that command comes from a very unglamorous place. Temperature receptors in your skin report a drop, the hypothalamus notices the number is out of range, and it fires the sympathetic nervous system, which dumps noradrenaline onto those 5 million muscles all at once. The hypothalamus is not making an artistic decision here. It's a thermostat. It's a spreadsheet with a body. And the resulting goosebumps behave exactly like something a thermostat would produce. They're global. They show up everywhere at once. They hold steady for as long as the cold does, and they do not build, peak, or have a favorite part. They also, and this is the punchline of the entire cold pathway, do not work. Trapping an insulating air layer requires hair long enough to trap air. Yours isn't. The thermostat is still faithfully signaling a radiator that was removed from the building a long, long time ago. Musical chills use the exact same muscles and produce something that behaves nothing like that. Ask anyone to describe it and you'll get the same shape of answer. It starts somewhere specific, usually the scalp or the top of the spine. It moves in a direction, and it's over in a few seconds. It has a beginning and an end. It's attached to a moment in the song, and it's usually the same moment every time. Cold goosebumps are a climate. Musical goosebumps are an event with a timestamp. And crucially, musical goosebumps feel like something. They're pleasurable, sometimes overwhelmingly so, which is a strange thing to say about a minor muscle contraction. Same output, different chain of command, 2 different departments in the building, 1 shared printer. Cold goes hypothalamus, sympathetic nerves, skin. Music takes a much stranger route. It goes through the systems that handle threat and reward, and those systems then reach over and grab the same sympathetic output the thermostat uses. Which raises an obvious question. Why is a song getting anywhere near your threat system? Because sudden, unexpected, loud sound is one of the very few things a mammal treats as dangerous by default. No learning required. Sound reaches the emotional structures of your brain remarkably fast, on a route that doesn't wait around for the slow, analytical, let me think about this part to weigh in. And if you look at what actually triggers chills in music, a full choir entering at once after a single voice, a drum hit landing after 2 beats of dead silence, a guitar suddenly shrieking into a register it wasn't in a second ago. Those are, acoustically, the same event as a branch snapping behind you. The 4 most beautiful seconds of your favorite song are being processed, in part, by the department whose actual job title is, "Was that a snake?" But you don't experience fear, you experience pleasure, and that's because of the other system in the room. When people listen to music that reliably gives them chills, imaging studies find dopamine release in the striatum, the same reward circuitry that responds to food, sex, money, and every drug worth banning. That alone would be interesting. What makes it genuinely useful is that the release isn't one event, it's 2, in 2 different places, at 2 different times. During the build-up, before the big moment, there's a release in one region. At the peak moment itself, there's a separate release in another. Anticipation isn't a warm-up act for the reward. Anticipation gets paid separately. And that answers the question about timing, which is the part almost nobody expects. Dopamine is not the chemistry of getting the thing. It's the chemistry of closing in on the thing. It's not the meal. It's smelling the restaurant from the parking lot and knowing you're 4 minutes out. So the chills land in the bar before the drop, in the breath before the key change, in the silence before the chorus, because that's where the anticipation circuit is doing its loudest work. Your body files the receipt before the purchase goes through. If you sit there waiting for the big moment to arrive so you can finally feel something, congratulations. The feeling already happened and you were looking the wrong way. None of this works unless your brain is predicting. And here's the thing. It is constantly, whether or not you know a single word of music theory. Meter, key, chord progression, phrase length. You absorbed all of it by exposure. The same way you can feel a sentence approaching its end without ever having diagrammed one. Music is a structured stream of small bets, and composers have spent centuries learning to bet against you gracefully. Hold the note past where it should resolve, detour through a chord that doesn't belong, drop the arrangement out entirely, delay the downbeat by a fraction, then resolve it. Tension created, tension released, on a schedule, which means chills don't happen at pretty notes. They happen at load-bearing ones. A good drop and a good punchline are structurally the same engineering problem. Set an expectation, bend it, land somewhere the audience didn't plan for, but immediately accepts. That's also why the song you found breathtaking at 19 still works, and the song that only had a nice tone doesn't. Now, the part that shouldn't make sense. If chills depend on surprise, you'd expect them to come from new music. They mostly don't. People get chills overwhelmingly from songs they already know, often songs they've heard hundreds of times, at the same second, every time, with full advance warning. And the reason is that you need an extremely accurate model of what should happen next in order to feel the delay as a delay. To an unfamiliar ear, a held suspension is just a note that lasts a while. To a familiar ear, it's a note refusing to do its job, and refusal only registers if you knew the job. The surprise works better when you know it's coming, which is exactly why you can see the entire track of a roller coaster from the parking lot and your stomach still evacuates at the top of the first hill. There's one more trigger worth naming, because it shows up in an unreasonable number of chill-inducing moments. The human voice doing something it might not survive. Cracking, jumping registers, going thin and strained at the very top. A singer pushing at the ceiling of their range is producing, in pure acoustic terms, something not far from the sound of a small mammal in trouble. And some very old, very literal part of you leans in hard before the rest of you has decided how you feel about the bridge. So who actually gets this? Depending on the study and how honestly people report, somewhere between roughly half and 2/3 of people say they experience chills from music at all, and a smaller slice get them often and reliably. The interesting question isn't the number, it's what predicts it. And it's not what you'd guess. It's not being an emotional person. The strongest personality link is to openness, to experience. and specifically to the intellectual and aesthetic engagement side of it, rather than the feeling side. In other words, the people whose skin reacts hardest to music are, on average, the people paying the closest attention to it. Chills are less evidence that you're romantic and more evidence that you're a nerd about it. There's also a structural hint. One small study found that people who reliably get chills had more white matter connecting the auditory areas of the brain to regions involved in emotional processing. Essentially better broadband between the department that hears and the department that cares. It was about 20 people and one study, so please don't build a personality around it, but it fits the pattern. This isn't a feeling being added on top of the music, it's the music getting further into the building. And if you're sitting there having never felt this, the wiring may be fine. The conditions might just be wrong. Chills are almost impossible when music is furniture. Background listening, half attention, something else on the screen. Prediction doesn't run properly, so there's nothing to violate. The setup that actually works is depressingly simple. A song you know well, headphones, nothing else happening, and attention aimed at the build-up rather than the big moment, since we've established the big moment is late to its own party. What definitely does not work is watching your own arm and waiting. Frisson is a shy animal. Point a flashlight at it and it leaves. Which leaves us with two kinds of goosebumps that look identical and mean opposite things. The cold ones are a working reflex that lost the equipment it was built for, a perfectly executed command to fluff fur you don't have. The musical ones are that same abandoned reflex getting picked up by the reward system and repurposed into something with no survival value whatsoever, which humans then built an entire global industry on top of. Composers spent several hundred years reverse engineering entirely by ear a broken thermoregulation circuit and got good enough at it that they can now make the hair on a stranger's arm stand up on cue at a specific second in a specific bar on the third listen. So the next time the drums drop out and your arms go strange half a second early, that's your nervous system trying to make you warmer and larger in the face of an incoming threat that is in fact a chord. It fails at both. It has failed at both for 1,000,000 years. And it's still the closest thing you have to physical proof that something moved you.